Now I'd like to go and introduce our keynote speaker for the day, Dr. Owen Lewis. Owen is a senior clinician, a very experienced health educator, and a long-time member of HealthServe Australia. And Owen, we're very much looking forward to hearing your stories, and very grateful that you can spare time, as I know you're working today. So thank you very much for making time available to share with us your story. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to everybody who's turned up this morning. So it shows a great commitment, setting aside your Saturday morning to share with us. I'm very much aware that we're a group of friends who are committed to each other as much to the organisation. You know, we spur each other on to these activities. I've been home from South Sudan for a month now, and I've been a little bit numb, I think. I mean, I charged straight off to work up in the APY lands at Indulkana, and then I've had a couple of weeks at Roxby Downs, and contrasts are extreme. At Indulkana, I was very aware of the impoverishment of the people there, and in Roxby Downs at their wealth. I seem to have spent the last week doing medicals for miners and seeing children with colds, and writing sick certificates for people with colds. And thinking about the trip to South Sudan, just very aware of privilege. So we had a lovely holiday in Scotland and indulged ourselves in ways that were very unforgettable and exciting and enjoyable. And then going to South Sudan, it was like coming home in some ways. Everything worked. I mean, we got there. We caught COVID in the first week, and maybe it could have even been at the airport, where we were in such a crowd of people. It didn't seem to matter. We weren't very sick. And I had been wrestling with something that made me cross. A friend I'd known from South Sudan for a long time is always leaning on me a little bit for money, mostly because he needs it. I'll tell you about David. He's a priest with a social work background, who I first met on a team with the Archbishop to do with the clinic, which I'll talk about in a little while. And David was supposedly going to set up the diocesan social services committee and work with INGOs such as ourselves on different church projects. Well, anyway, David always had a bit of a hard luck story. His family got flooded out the year before last when the river was in flood, and so he took his family to a camp near Juba for internally displaced people. He, along with nearly half of the population of Bor, had to move away from the floods. And in this camp, the first thing he asked for was some money to buy a tent. So I sent that money, and then I can't remember, but over the last couple of years, there've been a number of incidents. Then his sister got murdered. Her husband was a policeman and murdered her. She was the first wife, and there was a second wife, and there were children. And David went off to that place in a far off place and rescued his sister's children. And then the husband chased after them, and their lives were in danger. And they needed to rapidly escape to Uganda. So again, I sent some money for to help them get out of the country. And then there was another time when David's father was sick in hospital, and I sent some money for that. And then before this trip, he said, "What about you send some money for a phone?" So I said, "Okay, what model are you interested in?" Anyway, I looked through the models and downgraded his choice to something around the $200 mark. And I took that with me. And while I was on the way, he said, "Oh, what about another one? That one was for my wife, and I need one for myself." So I got a bit cross with him and felt that I was being a bit pressed on, having spent thousands on my own entertainment and tripping and whatnot. Anyway, I handed it over at the airport, and then subsequently, I think just after I got back, his wife was in hospital with tonsillitis and suddenly needing to have a tonsillectomy. And I thought, this is crazy. Why do you do a tonsillectomy for somebody with tonsillitis? Anyway, that's what happened. And I did send the money, but I questioned seriously the motivation of the surgeon in Juba who took out the tonsils. So this sense of frustration and anger with my friend is pretty small stuff compared to the difficulties we saw in South Sudan. And my own feelings about it are very conflicted, just as they are about the fact that every couple of days I was forking out 3,000 South Sudan pounds for internet. And when it ran out, I said, "Oh, can't I make this last a day or two longer?" And I found I was spending as much on internet as I was paying the driver. So a driver was assigned to us, and I know that we were providing his sustenance for the whole family, and he was just getting by on what we gave him, which was a tiny fraction on what we spent ourselves for maintaining ourselves, and as I mentioned, on the internet. And there's so many other examples I could mention about the enormous contrast between us wealthy Australians and the difficulties of these people in South Sudan. I've going to share my screen showing about the Institute. Looks like I need to go back to the top. Ah, I see. This is the one I need. So when we got to Bor, which I had visited twice before since 2016, I came across the sign of the Institute and noticed that it's getting a bit faded. The Jonglei Health Science Institute certainly was in a bit of a state. This institute does have some nice grounds on the outside, and that building was funded by the Egyptians and was supposed to be a specialist clinic of Bor Hospital. There are no specialists. There are about 4 doctors, and most of the work is done by health assistants or clinical officers, as they're called there. There were some good times in lunchtime, and some of the staff and students. So this is the Jonglei Health Science Institute, and it's a government institute. So our involvement goes back to when the ICMDA was invited to set up a medical school in Bor. Bor is the capital city of Jonglei, a state in the middle of the country, which was the centre of bloodshed in the conflicts from 2015 onwards. And this place, the hospital, is a pretty primitive place, nowhere near ready to have a medical school. So our friends Anil and others who went on that first trip thought it would be much better to train clinical officers and midwives, and they established the institute with the help of ICMDA, but it had to evacuate to Uganda because of the fighting. And so I taught in Uganda 2 or 3 times. And now when peace was restored, I went back and taught in South Sudan. This time, the institute, under the auspices of the government. Here's the hospital with its emergency department and cows. Well, why are cows featuring very prominently here? It's because cows are a very big part of South Sudanese culture. So when you get married, if you're a man, you have to present a dowry of a certain number of cows, depending on the prestige of the family that you're marrying into, and then you can receive your wife. And while I was there, I was asked, would I help to buy a cow for a member of staff who wanted to get married.
Excuse me, Owen. I think we're still looking at slide 6. Is that what everyone else is saying?
Can you see the cows?
No cows.
No.
Oh, so I don't know why. I'm sharing my screen. I'll stop sharing and share again, shall I?
All right. Welcome to Richard Wong. Great to have you with us, Richard. That's looking better, Owen. Yes.
Yeah, you can see a cow.
Cows, yes.
I'll just go back and show these pictures again. That's the battered looking sign and some students and the hospital. There's the cows and there's the muddy roads of Bor. So we got there in the rainy season, and we were glad to have a vehicle, which was the one that Anil and Shalini used, and we stayed in their place and used their vehicle. Bor is very much a rural place, and this village life is almost in the centre of the town. Bor is on the River Nile, and there's some trade up and down. You could go to Juba on one of these boats, but they are also for fishing. So here is the tilapia fish, which we very much enjoyed. Once or twice a week we'd have tilapia. Now here's one of the clinical officer students. They have access to computer and PowerPoint projector. The teaching of the clinical officers, who do a 3-year course to prepare them as generalists, clinicians. They're the backbone of the health services. The teaching is very traditional, lectures and discussions. Through Prime, we endorse broader range of teaching techniques and holistic approach to teaching. Certainly did our best, but we'd go back to the traditional methods. There's a lot of assessment in their course, and this assessment driving their learning was a big part of the approach. Also getting them to stand up and present was a big part of it as we were building their confidence. We have a lot of fun in classroom. Mary and I were there with the students. I think this is when we had a Bible study. Mary was teaching midwifery, Mary's an ordained minister, but she revived her midwifery knowledge for that purpose, and I taught a whole range of clinical subjects. So here's a part of a report from Anil. So 19 sat the exams in June, 18 passed. They did fantastically, including the top student in the country, and 10 of the 13 students were in the top 15 in the country. There being, I think, from memory, about 8 other institutes around the country teaching these clinical officers and midwives. There's another cohort of students who will complete at the end of next year. And one thing to note is that because of losing tutors, Anil and Shalini have had to just be realistic and say, well, we can only manage so much work. So they're not taking a cohort of students next year, just so that they can, there's Anil and Shalini and one other teacher. The problem about retaining tutors is about conforming to the government system. The government wages for tutors are very low compared to what they can earn from other NGOs around the place. So this has been very frustrating for Anil and Shalini, who train up these teachers and then lose them. After 6 weeks of teaching, while Anil and Shalini were away in India, Mary and I enjoyed the final week, which was a sort of a sports week and other activities, while the students were taking a break just before their placement in the community. A rainbow over the building where Mary and I stayed, which is Anil's and Shalini's accommodation. This is a trip out to the clinic, which has been constructed over nearly 10 years now, started in 2013. And there's the bishop, and with the background of the clinic. And we're hoping to open in February. This is the Boer Cathedral. Some wildlife and goat and the bird.
Starling.
Okay, that's the first presentation. I wanted to share now the other one, which is just a few pictures of the clinic. Oh, I see. This one here.
Welcome to Alachia. See you.
So Anil and Shalini were first involved there with the teaching in the institute in the centre of town, but about 10 kilometres out of town, a clinic is being established on the diocesan grounds. And the aim of the clinic is to provide mother and child services to village people who live nearby. And this was first proposed by the Mothers Union and taken up by the Diocese of Adelaide as a project. There are some clergy with my son-in-law Daniel, who is working for the Diocese of Adelaide, and Bishop Driver and the construction team. You can see that it's very much based on containers. And there's Mama Lindy, which is Bishop Jeffrey's wife, who is a key person in relating to the Mothers Union. So these were the buildings constructed. We got involved in 2019 to put on the superstructure roof. You might wonder why it's taken so long. Well, the war going on was a big factor. Then the floods. We put on the roof, and it's been sitting there. We raised the containers above the water. So this is a few words taken out of the latest proposal, is that HealthServe and contribute to the funding of the first year, or the first 3 years possibly, of the operation of the clinic. And we're going to be partnering with the African Mission Healthcare, a US-funded body that has promised half the funding if they can find another partner. That could be us. And here is the budget. We're being requested to find around $12,000 to contribute to the funding for the first year. So why are we doing this? Well, HealthServe has contributed over the years to many clinics and primary health facilities. We tend to be involved in construction and capital works and not involved in the running expenses. So this is a little bit exceptional in that regard. Anil is hopeful that other INGOs working in the area who are in the funding health system in South Sudan might take this up as one of the clinics. But to do so, we have to sort of demonstrate that it's a viable operation. So our contribution is to get it started so that it will attract attention and funding. The other peculiar thing about this proposal is that we're being asked to guarantee the money. Often with our projects, we can only promise to send what to bring in. But in this case, because we're talking about running expenses, we can either help or we can't. So we have to consider this. So the proposal is coming up at the board meeting shortly. So my reflections on this are about my sense of being conflicted over our wealth and our fantastic systems of healthcare in Australia, and compare those with the very dire situation in places like Durham, and wanting to do something about it, and all the time wrestling with personal relationships and long-term commitments. So I think my repetitive involvement in South Sudan is largely due to our strong friendship with Anil and Shalini, who are South Indian missionaries, who we knew from our time in Nepal. Mary taught in the missions course that Anil ran. It was a medical missions course, so it was designed for people with a health background who were involved in missions in India. And so our commitment is largely based on that deep friendship over the years and wanting to work together with our friends for good. And that's what I find in HealthServe also. So I commend our leaders for their work on the PBI and for all the work that goes behind the scenes in examining projects and looking at costings and whether we're spending money in the right way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Owen. Excellent presentation. South Sudan, one of the, yes, round of applause.